I'm Daniel, the past life regressionist, and it's time to begin.
Lift off and the clock has started.
This is Timeless Spirituality. Enjoy each and every time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Timeless Spirituality. If you would like to book a regression with me to discover who, when, and where you have been throughout time, you can reach me on Instagram at The Past Life Regressionist or my website, thepastliferegressionist.com. And now, it's time to begin. Lisa, thanks so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. And thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I mean, my audience already knows this. I'm a bit of a dork. I never quite know how to respond to that. If it's just a simple, like, you're welcome will suffice, or I'm still working on that. Yeah,
somebody told me once, if somebody says something nice to you and or pays you a compliment, just say thank you. Keep it simple.
Yeah. Like that primary rule of writing. Keep it simple,
Right.
stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Okay, well, I'm going
Okay.
to do my best to implement that from here on out. So thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome. And I'm going to overlook the fact that we started this conversation by referring to one another as stupid.
Huh? Okay, first question. What is your favorite song that has to do with time and why?
So my favorite song is Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. I love her as an artist. She's just incredible as a human being as well. I love that song, and on one level, it's about a breakup and about, still being there for someone that you love. But I think on another level, there's that idea of that same person coming back into our lives over and over again. So, yeah, I really love that song.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. So you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Lisa Manterfield, and I write fiction for adults and young adults. And I've also written a couple of nonfiction books, also about loss and grief, which are topics that I keep coming back to over and over again. My first novel is A Strange Companion, and it's the story of a young girl who believes that her adopted niece is the reincarnation of her first love. So it's really a story about loss and grief and resilience and moving on. And, I find myself coming back to these topics of grief and loss. Probably, I think, because I lost my own father at a very young age, at 15. And so I think that is grief that I did not have the chance to reconcile then. So I think I'm still working my way around that and figuring out the whole grief and loss thing. I think as many of us are.
So why is it that you wanted to write a book about reincarnation?
I first started thinking about this book when I was kind of exploring this idea of connections that we make with people. So sometimes you meet somebody and you just have an instant connection with them, even though you don't necessarily know much about them. You connect with them immediately. And I have friends that I've moved on from in my life as far as our paths, but I still feel a really deep connection to those people. And then there can be other people that you can, work with or be connected with in another way for years and years, but they never really stick. And so I started thinking about this idea of, connections of people that we might come across in our lives over and over again, and started sort of researching around this idea of reincarnation. And I had some friends who'd had sort of past life experiences and, channeling experiences. And I was just really fascinated with that. And I wanted to explore this idea of, losing someone that is very close to you, that you love, and what happens, what happens there? What happens to that connection? Do these people come back to us? And so, the more I researched, the more interested I became in it until this story started to come together.
How did your beliefs shape the story?
I think that I consider myself to be curious and sort of open to possibilities of all kinds. And so I can't say that when I began to write that was a firm believer in past lives, but I wanted to stay open to that possibility and just learn as much as I could, and just kind of form my own beliefs about that possibility. And I think that I think that we have found evidence. We've all talked to people who've had these experiences and whose lives have been really changed. And during my research, I did my own past life regression, which was just a very sort of soul changing experience, and a very beautiful experience, actually, and not sort of the terrifying experience that some people who haven't done that might think it might be, or perhaps I thought it might be too. So yeah, I mean, I just feel like I always want to stay open to possibilities. And I mean, I come from, like yourself, I come from a science background, and so there are things that science can prove, and science has proven, and we ought to pay attention to that. But there are so many things in our lives that science doesn't have an explanation for. And so I think, I always want to stay open to those possibilities.
I absolutely love the book. I know I was telling you that before we hit record. I just want to put that out there to the audience. I absolutely love it. So before we start really talking about the book, I wanted to put that out there for everyone. So I guess the first thing with that is, why did you choose to make it a young adult novel?
I originally wrote the book actually with an older protagonist, and it wasn't working. And I just think that it just felt like it needed to be a younger protagonist who was, somebody who maybe wasn't emotionally mature enough to deal with the loss that she deals with in the book, and was looking for the right tools to deal with that, or trying to find her way through this loss and trying to understand the other losses. And so it just felt like it needed to be a younger person. And I feel like it worked, because I mean there are parts of the book where she's quite emotionally immature in some ways.
A little bit.
Yeah, she makes some bad decisions. She makes some very poor choices, and she is not always gentle with other people who are dealing with their own losses. But I think that gave her a lot of room for growth and learning, which is really what books are all about. You want a character who's gonna be different at the end than they were at the beginning through this journey of the book.
Yeah, there were definitely many moments where I found myself saying, "Oh no, oh no, 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 she's not. No, she's not going to do that." But that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. And I know, I mean, I appreciate that you love the book, and I appreciate you saying that. And I know, I try not to read too many reviews, because everything's an opinion. But there are some readers who were just frustrated with her because she just keeps making bad choices over and over again. But sometimes we do that in our lives, don't we? We just keep making bad choices.
Yeah, she was 19.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you do at that age.
Right.
Not only that, it's a book. Those people would probably be writing reviews saying, why wasn't there enough conflict if she wasn't doing anything?
Right.
You need that to move the story along.
Right. And they always say, put your character up a tree, throw rocks at them, throw bigger rocks at them, get them down again.
Exactly.
So,
I think you made the right call there.
Thank you.
Because it would be boring if she didn't make those, I don't want to say mistakes, but if she didn't make those choices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she learns thankfully, she learns from her mistakes and the choices that she makes, and all is well in the end.
Why did you decide to keep it so grounded?
I wanted to write about loss and grief, and that's it's a universal experience, and we have all been through that. It's a very real experience, and And I wanted to, I wanted to keep it. I wanted to let readers feel this could happen to me. If you've experienced loss, you know that your mind plays tricks on you. The phone rings and you're sure it's going to be your loved one on the other end of the phone. It can't be. And so I think that we've all experienced these thoughts and feelings about, what happened to this person that I love? Where did they go? Can they talk to me? Can I talk to them? Will they come back? Um, and so even though, it's got if you like, a paranormal element to it, I think it is grounded in reality. And I had some of those experiences myself, when I lost my father at a young age, when the phone rings, is it him? Somebody knocks at the door. Oh, just for that split second, he's back. And then also, sort of looking at people or animals even, and just thinking, I wonder, could he come back? Will he come back to us? Has he come back to us in a different form? So, yeah, I mean, I think for me, that is reality. It is grounded.
I just like to piggyback on that by saying I liked that it was grounded. I really enjoyed the fact that it was so grounded because past lives are my world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of crazy stuff that I encounter, but it was cool to read a book that was just so grounded, and also keeping in the back of my mind, or at the front of my mind for that matter, I'm reading the story of a 19-year-old girl who has boy problems. And I thought that was so cool because you threw past lives into the mix.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it was very enjoyable. And I loved it. I thought it was great.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, you're not typically my target audience. It's a young adult novel, or it's a novel about a young adult. Let's put it that way. But I think the themes are very adult, and very relatable to adults. So yeah, even though you're reading about a girl with boy problems, she's got dead boy problems.
Yeah.
So which is a much for thankfully for most young adults is a more adult experience.
Well, admittedly, as I was reading it, I had to keep reminding myself that I wasn't the target audience. But it was great. I mean, I can't say enough good things about the book. It was, even without the past life element, as you were mentioning before, it's a book about grief and how to deal with it and how to find a way to let go and move on, and just the tricks that your mind play on you.
Yeah.
So I thought it was great.
And it's called a young adult novel, and that's sort of a category and a label that it has, to help find the readers who will love it. But many adults read young adult novels, and again, just because the protagonist is 19, I think that the themes and the experiences that she's dealing with are much more adult, and I think that adults will relate to that, and certainly anybody who's lost somebody close to them, I think, will relate to what she went through.
So you mentioned that you lost your father at 15, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Did you start coming around to these concepts around that time, or was that later on in life?
I think I'd always been open to possibilities, and I remember probably about 6 or 7 months after he passed away, somebody asked me if I wanted a kitten. And I'd never had a cat before. I'd not really managed to get past a rabbit and a hamster. But I had this opportunity to get a kitten. And so I talked my mom into it, and we got this little cat. And he was great, I loved him. But I remember that there was that moment of, he was one of those animals that just looks at you with like wise eyes. And I remember the one day just sort of looking at him and thinking, wow, he would have been born, not all that long after the time that my dad passed away. What if this little spirit of this cat who has become so important in my life is my dad come back to just keep an eye on us? And so I had been open to those possibilities and those ideas at a young age.
So is that why you decided to make, let's just say, the object of, I don't want to say affection necessarily, but the object of our curiosity a very young child because of the linear time sense?
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, thinking about really from a technical standpoint of being able to make the story make sense is having enough time pass between the character's first love dying and her being far enough along that people think she ought to be over it, as people so often say, but also, having enough time pass that it could be possible that he could be reincarnated. So yeah, so I needed to make the object of her affections, as you say. I don't think we give too much away if we said it's a young girl that comes into her life who she believes could be the reincarnation of her dead boyfriend. And I think I needed to make her also old enough that she was not yet verbal and couldn't say, couldn't actually speak, but could give other nonverbal signals. So all those decisions were purely, story related, of making the story actually be possible and work.
Well, it worked for me. I mean, granted, I do have my own theories about jumping around in linear time and time not being linear, but I was reading a book that wasn't about quantum physics, so it was okay. Everything worked for the story.
Yeah, good.
So
Yeah,
I think you nailed it.
it was a little bit of a juggle to get it all to work, but yeah, it did. Good.
So with that, would you like to read that excerpt?
Sure. Yeah, I can read the part where she first meets Mai. Okay, yeah, I would love to do that.
Thank you.
So I think for a little bit of a setup for your listeners is that Kat is her boyfriend Gabe died in an accident, and she's been trying to move on and she can't. Her brother and his partner adopt a young girl, a little girl from China. Her name is Mai. And Kat has come home to her hometown to meet her new niece. And so that's where we'll pick up this reading.
Cool.
Okay. The arrivals hall was full of people straining for first glimpses of their relatives and friends. There were some holding flowers and teddy bears, wriggling with anticipation, and tired-looking chauffeurs in dark suits holding signs with the neatly printed names of their next customers. Above the crowd, I spotted the smooth-shaved head of my brother-in-law, Alex, shining like a welcoming beacon in the sea of people. Beside Alex, I recognized the blonde waves of hair that fell around my mother's shoulders, and I felt a dimly familiar pang of longing. Only now that I saw her again did I realize just how much I'd missed her. Perhaps this trip we could mend the threadbare patch that had worn in our relationship. All of a sudden, the attire of the arriving passengers changed. Among the sundresses and t-shirts, a smattering of businessmen in dark suits made their way towards the chauffeurs, and a Chinese couple greeted an enthusiastic family welcoming committee. Two men in kanduras, the long white tunics of Arab countries, sauntered out in deep conversation. We all pressed forward to get a first glimpse of Mai. And then there they were. Despite the long trip and his slightly disheveled plaid shirt, my brother's smiling eyes shone out from behind his uber-hip, home-rimmed glasses. In his arms, he held a small girl, and my heart lurched to the corner of my chest as I got my first real look at my new niece. Her shiny black hair was gathered into perfectly even pigtails in a way my mother had never managed with mine, and fastened with matching purple ribbons. Her legs were stuck into puffy black boots and wrapped around John, and she surveyed the crowd with a look of skepticism. She had grown so much since the last pictures I'd seen. She had lost the baby cheeks, and her face had smoothed out into that of a beautiful little toddler. I stared at her through the sea of bobbing heads until I felt myself pulled forward in the surge of her welcoming new family. John embraced Alex and handed Mai over to her new dad. They'd spent weeks at a time in China over the past couple of years, and Mai clung to Alex like a familiar rock in a storm. And then the family surrounded her. They squeezed her chubby legs, stroked her tiny fingers, and pinched her porcelain cheeks as she squashed herself closer and closer to Alex and tried to disappear. Finally, when her lovely face creased into a wrinkled frown and tears sprung from her dark, anxious eyes, the family retreated. I found myself at the front of the group and stood a safe distance from Mai, watching her. John caught my eye and grinned as if Mum had told him he could be the one to lick the cake bowl for the rest of his life. He leaned over and whispered in Mai's ear, just loud enough I could hear too. Mai, do you want to say hello to your auntie Cat? Mai paused, then slowly turned her head towards me, without ever allowing her face to leave the safety of Alex's shoulder. From the corner of her glistening eyes, she peered at me through a lock of silken hair, taking in every detail of my features, trying to work out if I was someone she could trust. Then her gaze rested squarely on mine, and a creeping sensation slithered up the back of my neck, as if an army of hairy caterpillars was marching towards my scalp. A ripple of chilly air rolled down my body and out to the tips of my fingers. I shivered as a sharp thought shot through my mind for just an instant. I know you. Thank you.
What is it about that scene that you love?
That moment where she just gets a feeling. You know, she just sees a little girl that she's known was coming, her brothers who are all familiar, but she just has that moment of connection, just a look and just a feeling that, oh, I've met you before. I know you. And that's sort of the whole sort of seed of the story of just this feeling that keeps growing through the book, and the clues that she finds that just convince her that Mai is the reincarnation of Gabe. And I think that, you know, that's how we, you know, we're very intuitive about a lot of things. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the seed of the book was this idea of, you know, we meet people sometimes that we know nothing about, but we feel an instant connection to them. We can't explain it, but we feel it. And so I wanted that to be her first meeting with her, and a feeling of, oh, there's something about you.
Thank you so much for reading that. You know, the more and more I've been thinking about it, because you mentioned before that while it's classified as a young adult novel, it's really just about someone who's a young adult. And this is more of a technical question. But why do they have to group it in those categories of young adult novel? Because it really does have adult themes to it.
I wish I could answer that question for you. Really, I mean, if you go back sort of 10, 15 years, young adult, the young adult category didn't exist. You know, it's sort of really, it's a marketing tool to say, okay, these are books about young adults for young adults. But yeah, it just happens that I like to write young protagonists. I enjoy doing that. I think there's just so much room for growth there. But I tend to write some more serious themes, and not that young adult novels don't have serious themes, they do. But you know, I tend to write young women who are not necessarily alone, but they don't have the usual sort of cadre of friends that a lot of young adult novels have, and they're figuring out life on their own, which is certainly sort of a more adult theme.
What is it that you hope readers will walk away with?
I would like for readers to walk away feeling that they're not alone. If they have dealt with loss and dealt with grief, you know, there are a million ways to deal with grief. We all do it differently, and there isn't a prescribed method for getting through it. And I want people to know that when they've dealt with loss and dealt with grief, that the way that they deal with it is okay. It's okay, and they're not alone.
Well, mission accomplished. I think you did a great job conveying that message in the book.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing. just again, for everyone listening, it's a great book. So where can everyone find it?
They can find it on all the online retailers. And if you want to support your local independent bookstore, you can ask them to order a copy. And it's available in print, ebook, and audiobook. So you could also check out your local library. And you can find more about the book itself on my website, which is lisamanterfield.com.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I can't wait for the next novel.
It's coming. It's coming. There's another one out there, and there's more in the pipeline. They're just not quite made their way out yet.
Yes. Fellow time travelers, your journey through time awaits you. Just want to thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. And if you're interested in discovering who, when, and where you have been throughout time, and you'd like to book a session with me, just go ahead and send me a message on Instagram at The Past Life Regressionist, or you can reach me through my website, yourpastliferegressionist.com.